Welcome to the 17th episode of the Tertius Times podcast. Today is Wednesday, September 15th, 2021. I'm your host, Brian Wright, and I want to focus our attention on three articles on religious persecution or human rights abuses. As I announced earlier, there will be no interview segments for this week, but I have two interesting interviews scheduled soon, and those will be coming out in the next couple of weeks, God willing, so stay tuned. Today, we will look at stifling free speech and religious expression in China, power problems in Lebanon, and an editorial on a recent speech by the UN Secretary General. The links to the stories are in the description. As I also announced previously, there is also an upcoming USURF event you are invited to join entitled Strategies for Religious Freedom in Fragile States, and will take place online next Wednesday, September 22nd at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Registration is open and is free. Details will be provided at the end of the podcast. The link to register is also in the description. The founder of Apple Daily and the now defunct Next Magazine, Hong Kong media entrepreneur Jimmy Lai, who is currently imprisoned in China for his free speech and religious freedom advocacy, was, quote, honored with the 2021 Christa Fidelis Laici Award, unquote, Latin for Christ's faithful laity, for his, quote, work to stir and promote deeper awareness among all the faithful of the gift and responsibility they share, both as a group and as individuals in the communion and mission of the church, unquote. According to the article, jailed Hong Kong media mogul Jimmy Lai honored at National Catholic Prayer Breakfast from the Christian Post, September 15, 2021. Lai, a staunch critic of the Chinese Communist Party government, was unable to attend the prayer breakfast in Washington, D.C. due to his imprisonment. He frequently brought to light, quote, the political and religious persecution that occurs every day in China, unquote, inspiring millions, as the article points out, quote, to defend their God-given rights, unquote, and support of individual human dignity. Receiving the award for Lai was William McGurn, former chief speechwriter for President George W. Bush and a member of the Wall Street Journal editorial board. McGurn noted that Lai was in prison because, quote, his publications told the truth about China and Hong Kong. And though communism comes in many flavors, Soviet, Chinese, Cuban, the one thing that unites them all is that communism can never tolerate truth or truth tellers, unquote. McGurn also pointed out that Lai had the means to flee the country, but chose to stay, knowing that prison was a consequence of that choice. Quote, never, unquote, McGurn emphasized, quote, ever let anyone tell you your prayers are wasted because there's a good man unjustly held in prison on the other side of the world who would tell you that your prayers are what keeps him going, unquote. Pray for Jimmy Lai that he would remain strengthened and hopeful in prison, knowing that he is supported by millions around the world. Pray for Hong Kong that the freedoms they have enjoyed for generations may continue unabated, and it may prove to be basis for furthering the kingdom of God into China. Pray for China that all who live there may find the freedom not only provided by the government, but the freedom of spirit only God can provide. According to Lights Out at many Lebanese churches amid energy crisis from Mission Network News, September 15th, 2021, the Lebanese government has, quote, stopped supplying much electricity to the country, unquote, due to, quote, extreme fuel shortages, unquote, causing some churches to be without power, preventing many attendees from even driving to church, and disabling access to the internet to watch online services. Since Lebanon receives, quote, about 300 days of sunshine per year, unquote, solar power could potentially be a source of power, but unfortunately, it is currently cost prohibitive for most people in the country. Not included in the article is that prior to the devastating explosion last year in Beirut, Lebanon was in a faltering economic freefall. After the blast, predictably, conditions have only gotten worse. The country has also been plagued by a tumultuous political environment with massive corruption and, unfortunately, with the insertion of Hezbollah, a terrorist organization sponsored by Iran, whose primary goal is the elimination of Israel, an even more burdensome plight has been forced upon the people of Lebanon. As the article suggests, pray that God would comfort the church in Lebanon. Pray for all the people of Lebanon, that they would be granted stability and resources they need to live lives of provision and freedom. Pray for the leaders of Lebanon, including those in Hezbollah or the Party of God, that they would put aside their differences and focus on providing for their people. Pray that Hezbollah would particularly recognize the sovereignty of God, not as they understand it, but as God Himself declares it, so that they would cease their misguided ways and turn to Him. Quote, the world's nations have lost their way and are speeding toward a pivotal moment that will bring on a breakdown of global order. The planet is squeezed in the jaws of enormous stress as the nations are in a state of enmity and paralysis. According to the article, the United Nations Chiefs Apocalyptic Discourse from the Christian Post, September 15, 2021, summarizing a statement made by Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, in a recent speech. In this editorial piece, columnist Wallace B. Henley compares, quote, the fundamental struggle in the fallen world that's between cosmos, order, and chaos, fragmentation, and the collapse of boundaries. Gutierrez is seeing what many students of the Bible are noting. Apocalypse is at the threshold, unquote. While Henley acknowledges the Secretary General's concern is helpful, since he identifies many current societal ills and provides lofty goals, quote, it is, however, more quixotic than curative, unquote. Henley calls the socialist Gutierrez's words a, quote, globalist vision, unquote, full of, quote, globalist governments, unquote, offering nothing more than, quote, the same old panaceas, unquote, of, quote, an all-powerful state and the loss of human rights, unquote. Henley then quotes Jordan Peterson, who duly noted that the loss of transcendence welcomes hopelessness and despair. Since, as Henley puts it, quote, tyrants love to make themselves and their states transcendent, unquote, with their, quote, raw power seized and sustained, unquote, by force, stand opposed to the, quote, authentic authority granted from the higher to the lower to those under authority, unquote, particularly emulated by Jesus. Yet Henley also recognizes that, quote, institutional transcendence will not save us or heal problems like those Secretary General Guterres identifies. Temples will come down, towers will topple, and governments will be made up of humans classified as sinners, unquote. Henley offers this remedy instead, quote, transformation that comes through an encounter with the truly transcendence is the ultimate answer. Until we take it out of the religious closet and see it as the core dynamic of all life, we will continue to dust off the old panaceas and try them one more time in a world spinning rapidly into chaos. Pray for all people around the world that we may all experience that, quote, encounter with the truly transcendence, unquote, and that our divisions and grievances can be resolved in the simple adage, love your neighbor as yourself, the theme of the prayers from yesterday. Although it is clear and concise, it is perhaps the most aggressively empowering statement that will truly lead to the real tolerance and true togetherness reflected in the Trinitarian nature of our God that we all crave. This is another reminder that if you are interested and can make it, this free online hearing on religious freedom is scheduled for next Wednesday, and you can join in the free online event by registering through the link in the description. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you found the information presented here useful and that it encouraged you to pray for these areas of concern and perhaps even inspired you to take positive steps of involvement to alleviate the suffering of so many around the globe. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.